Hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and welcome to the channel. Now, today is Discord Tuesday, and we are going to continue our discussion, both in-world and kind of meta style, in our tabletop RPG community about orcs. Yes. As context for those who do not know, we are basically having a conversation about, um, orc uprising and its impact uh, within the RPG community, more or less about, how orcs are utilized, and essentially, WotC, Wizards of the Coast, has decided to change some of their policies when it comes to using many of the fantasy races, more specifically orcs, and their tacit relationship to racial stereotypes. And so I thought, you know what? I, I think I'd like to talk about this. And then I thought I'd like to talk about it in a kind of a reframe the conversation. So yesterday we did have a pretty good talk. We didn't get as far as we wanted to, which is why the show is has such a long form content. So if you are new to the show, if you are live, I see many of the regulars here, and there are probably others lurking around. Just be aware that we do have live interaction over on Twitch, YouTube, and our Discord server, and that maybe, just maybe, your comment will be highlighted and will be the highlight of the show. Okay. So today on Discord Tuesday, we pretty much default to talking about mechanics, basically gaming mechanics and its impact in the story, and how gaming mechanics can shape narrative, or how narrative could become something mechanical, and that kind of thing. And I thought, although we're going to talk about orcs, I thought I would bring up something that's can be a little bit of an eye-opener for most brand new gamers, and most of us have been playing games for a long time, why we end up choosing other game systems or homebrewing things. So in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and many of the iterations before that, including all of the sisters and cousins that have come away from it, there is this idea that your race and your biological processes and the culture that goes with it go hand in hand. And in a lot of literature, those kind of things, it's pretty shorthand, right? Other than human beings, for the most part, human beings being the most versatile in the majority of role-playing games, most races tend to be a confluence of their biology and their upbringing, their culture, and just mixing them together. And it doesn't take more than like 5 minutes to realize, like, sometimes it doesn't make any sense, but we go with it, right? Like in the beginnings, the BX versions of the OSR versions of a lot of the fantasy races, like you played dwarf, you played elf, you played halfling, right? They had certain capabilities, and they were limited to those particular capabilities. Cameron's like, oh, since you've said you wanted to rename Discord Tuesday, I thought up an alternative, Crunch Time Tuesday. Ooh, stolen. Okay. All right. There's one for you there, Cameron. All right, I appreciate that. Cameron giving me the F. Thank you. No, seriously, I appreciate that. I hadn't been giving it that much thought, to be honest with you. But I think maybe I was trying to promote the Discord channel. I don't know. Anyway, but you get the point, right? Like, no, thumbs up to you, sir. Thumbs up to you. Now, we get it that, like, elves are like, oh, they're pointy eared and they've got dark vision. Okay, we get that. And then you're like, okay, well, they also have skill with long and short swords and long and short bows. And you're like, wait, so all of them? Every elf? Like, who's teaching them this? Is this a biological process? How about that elven meditation? Is that how they sleep? Or is that something that is also taught to them? Dwarves the same way. Like, are they like born with a pickaxe? They just can't help but make a pickaxe, even if they're out in the desert or the swamps, or what? So we've all known that, right? Yeah, Red Dice Red Dice Diary says, yes, the old class as race. Effectively, each race was just a combination of other class abilities. You wanted to be a fighter mage, you played an elf. Yep. And of course, some of that was shaped around the narrative in a lot of storytelling, that elves were both magical and great fighters, especially after Tolkien's era. And so a lot of that was very much like monocultured. A lot of monoculturing happened a lot. Star Trek is like the master of the monoculture. Oh, we're a starship. We come near a planet. Surprising how everyone on the planet acts and behaves and dresses similarly. That's weird. And so in role playing games, that has been a default. Now, mind you, there's nothing wrong with that, really, especially if you want to just get. It's very simple shorthand, right? Hey, let's get started real quick. Oh, I want to be you know, um, a phallic, something something, some alien race or bizarre creature from another dimension or something, and you go, okay, great. Here are the stats for it. Go for it, and you're done. The But like I said, after 5 minutes, when you think about it, you're like, this doesn't quite fit. But then we get into something that is troubling when it comes to race and culture, nature or nurture. And nature is that you don't have a choice in your biological makeup. Here on, the planet Earth, some of us are, born with, um, very early age, terrible eyesight or darker skin or, flat hair follicles that twist and kink up and stuff, right? If was born short. And so part of nature is like, okay, you really don't have any control over it. That's how you were born. Red Dice says, yeah, agreed. The old race classes allowed you to play the fictional stereotyped version of the race. All elves knew magic and could fire bows. All dwarves loved gold and axes. Yeah. And again, in its context, there's nothing wrong with that. I've played. That system is still used even to today to elicit certain types of player and game master interactions in the world. Basically, like, yeah, right. There's like, I feel you on the born short. Halflings unite, yeah, including the hairy feet. Oh man, yeah. Oh yes, I absolutely hear you on that one. And mind you, there that's known as something known as archetypes, where there are games designed with archetypes in them because that's how we want to interact with the game. One of my favorite games is Feng Shui, and there's a second edition of it. I don't have the second edition, but in the first edition of Feng Shui, it was based around Hong Kong action movies, the over the top, gun fu martial arts kind of thing, and they had archetypes, and the archetypes are in a gaming style designed for niche protection so that each archetype was the master and commander of what they did. So there was like a number of archetypes were like Masked Avenger, Maverick Cop, martial artist, Big Brute. I'm trying to think of some others there. Old Master, Troubled Youth, I believe, was another one. So anyway, each one of them had their own specific like talents, and things of that nature. I think there was one simply known as gun-toting assassin, et cetera, right? And so each of those particular archetypes had their own thing. So in earlier editions of Dungeons and Dragons, the golden axe-loving dwarves were the ones who were tough, and we knew that they knew their way around caves. Great, okay. And then the elves were the charismatic, beautiful ones, and they had magic, and they could fire bows and hit people with their sword. Okay, all right, yeah, so some magic knowledge, and so on. And then, of course, human beings, because, well, fantasy races didn't exist, but we know human beings, they were the most versatile, okay? Well, now let's talk about some of the problems and issues with some of the biology versus some of the culture. And that is that, like, for example, does that mean that because dwarves are short and stout and tough, that they only go towards short and stout and tough professions in their life? Or, if you're born with dark vision, that's a biological thing, but can you be taught dark vision? Probably not, and yeah. Dead Man says in recent Star Trek series, there are a number of races that come from multiple society planets. Star Trek Enterprise had the villains, the Xindi, were comprised of 6 different cultures from one planet. And I can almost guarantee that happened because of because of the stereotype of what they had been doing so often till that point, right? It makes perfect sense. Where like, there's a planet with different cultures, and they kind of don't get along, and they speak different languages. Wow, because Star Trek was actually quite known for that, for more than a lot. And a lot of times, of course, when you have a 1-hour show, how deep can you really get? Hell, even a 2-hour movie. I mean, there's only so much detail you can make unless you're, if you're writing novels, I suppose you can go into far more detail than that. But since we're playing role-playing games, sometimes at the table, the simplicity of something can also engender a predictive thoughts and such, right? And so, therefore, for example, when it comes to, say, orcs, orcs are known to be the big brutes. They are the berserker race, if you wish. They're brutal, sometimes known to eat people, and pretty generalized to be pretty stereotypical. Part of like the goblinoid horde. And of course, as in role-playing games, you're like, well, we need a big bad. Maybe the big bad doesn't have to be singular as like a dragon or something. Maybe we want something horde-like. Undead fit into that category. And for humanoids, most of the goblinoids fit into that. Yeah, I hear you, Omen. Omen's like, oh, you mean like government employees? Yep. The mindless horde, right? Beating you down. Oh, so you wanna get those that license for your car? Stand in line. Stand in line now. Yeah. Yep, Red Dice says, I agree that Star Trek had some stereotyped races. However, they had the Vulcans and Romulans who were biologically similar, but had drastically different societies. Yeah, of course. And mind you, because this actually fits perfectly with our discussion. Sometimes we want to make something the exception so that the exception sticks out from the norm, right? So that becomes the story is the exception, not the rule. And so like having like Star Trek with Vulcans and Romulans having 2 separate societies but being biologically similar, that becomes the exception. And most in current role playing in Dungeons and Dragons, the exception are the player character races, right? Players get to choose; they are the exception in and of themselves. They get to choose classes, and monsters. They tend to, just to make things simplistic, they kind of flowed away from giving monster rate, class features and things like that. The human characters have inspiration and the monsters don't, so on and so forth, right? The 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 player characters get to choose their alignment, and if you even bothering to use that, which has been thrown to the background, right? They get to, if you're using optional rules like multi-classing or dual classing or whatever, the player characters get to do those things. They are the exception to the rule. And it does bring up this fact, like we were talking yesterday, about orcs still remaining listed as monsters in monster manuals, as most of the races, the races that can be picked by the player characters, have moved over into the playable race category and less likely into the monster category. And it makes you wonder, mind you, it depends on how you rationalize this, but for example, are orcs strong and tough because their culture desires them to be that way? Or are they biologically strong and tough and then their culture shapes around their biology? And, is it circumstance? Is it their nurturing? Is it where they live and how they live? Or is it part of their culture? Not even where they live, but it's more, this has been passed on from generation to generation. Is their environment so brutally tough? Or would an urban, um, a small orc child raised in an urban setting, could they become a book nerd and not ever gain that strength and toughness that other orcs have? I don't know. Is their size and girth, their musculature, part of their body, or is it something developed? I mean, even today, there are certain traits and that our societies value over other traits, and those traits might have to deal with knowledge or speed or balance or agility or something. And it could be, for a game company to have to tell you how to rationalize that, they pretty much can't do that, because it would be too many one-offs. So of course we default to, oh well, here's a bonus to your stats and let's move on, right? And the stereotyping comes in the fact that while some other races are known for their instincts or their intelligence or their speed or their beauty or something, orcs have been relegated, of course, down to the big brute. They're brutal, they're bloodthirsty, they're strong, they're not very smart. And in our reality, there have been periods of time where people have, like, literally scientifically, basically, denounced other cultures and races for being exactly that way. Oh, they have no philosophy, or they are lower on the totem pole in terms of societal development. Therefore, they are less than human. So here in the chat, Deadman stuck with Star Trek. Deadman says there's also the episode from Star Trek: The Next Generation where they encounter a probe seeding life around the galaxy. Yep. The seeded life has been is a what is it? Panspermia is the idea of that, either by like an intelligent species or through like an asteroid or something like that. Yeah, panspermia is also a sci-fi trope, right? That humanity and some other alien races, although we might look different, come from a similar origin. I believe it was Battle Beyond the Stars had that where it was exposed that was the case at the end of the couple of 2 seasons or something, 2 or 3. Cameron says, I always assumed that those planets had assimilated each other's cultures until it was just one global culture because of technology by the time the Enterprise rolled around. You guys are stuck on Star Trek. What's this? Sorry, I brought it up. No, but that can be the case, right, Cameron? Like, oh well, if they've gotten to the point where they're intergalactic, more or less they've got a Starbucks in every corner of their planet first before they got out into space, right? So I get that as well. which is kind of funny because in many ways we're kind of doing that to our own planet, where we are like right now we're all interacting from around the world, so we are kind of like commingling our culture and language and behavior and things like that. Yeah. Oh yeah. I can't argue with that. Uh, that makes perfect sense. As a matter of fact. Um, um, Omen says, note also how dwarves have well-developed livers that make them almost immune to alcohol poisoning, and elves have great inner ears that improve their balance and grace. Right. So the the problem that Watsi is seeing, and this has been a thing semi-proven in over time, that orcs are a stand-in for black and brown cultures from around the world because they were ported over from literature where you had you had the hero, and then you have to have some kind of like, it was black and white, right? You had the hero of the story, and then you had the bad guys, and the bad guys were savages, and sometimes the savages were described as like darker skinned or slant-eyed, or and then he would give them like a bunch of these other features, whether their teeth were shaved down the points, or they were hunched over, or hanging in the shadows, or talking with fiendish things, and so you had to have these um, you had to have some kind of conflict for the hero to have. And it was very easy, especially at a time where there were literally scientists during the age of exploration that were like, oh, it's proven that we are ahead of these, animalistic mongoloid, no moral code cultures from around the world until during the so-called Age of Enlightenment. And we've ported that over in terms of like orcs and a lot of the other goblinoid races into the game. Now, of course, like I said yesterday, in the current iteration, most people playing the game now, especially if you're young, have zero idea where that came from. So of course they're going to have they're not going to connect the dots that way. They're like, no, human's human, and orc is orc. I don't see what the big deal is. They're two separate things. I'm not drawing that line, but there is a small yet vocal percentage of the role playing community that does draw that line and believes that. I've not gotten a direct message, but I will have seen across my feed some pretty horrendous racist things coming out of our RPG community. And sure, is that population extremely tiny? I'm pretty sure it is. I don't see how you can hold on to those thoughts and role play, because the concept of role playing is inhabiting other people's skin. But whatever, and thereby some people try to reinforce that because the gaming statistics say that they reinforce it, right? Yeah. Uh, yeah. Dante's like, yeah, like it came for orcs. Yeah, got Andorians. Visible confusion memes inserted here. Oh yeah. And by the way, us. Anyway, so you have this idea that like the orcs are have been set as the other, right? Um, they are the half orc has always been known as like the special snowflake. They are the one who is uh other people's skin. Who are you? Buffalo Bill? Yeah. Uh, it puts the lotion on his skin, or else it gets the hose again. What a sick movie! I love it. Absolutely love it. There's some stuff hidden in that movie that's pretty horrible. Pretty horrible. Uh, anyway, sorry. I got a montage of Silence of the Lambs through my head. Sorry about that. But other parts of yeah, it's a pretty horrible movie. But again, I love it. So um, a lot of times, like for example, there are plenty of things. Yeah, I hear you, Omen. Like Anthony Hopkins' eyes, the lazy eyes that he had. Yeah, pretty terrible. All piercing and unblinking. Um, the There's plenty of channels devoted to like character builds, right? And they'll say, all right, well, if you play a tiefling, tieflings have a bonus for this and this. What are the best classes for them? And invariably, orcs come around to be more of the warrior classes. But unlike the past, where if you played certain racial types, you had a disadvantage to playing something. You had like a penalty. Penalty to your intelligence, or penalty to your dexterity, a penalty to your charisma, or what have you, based on the character class you played. Um, Orcs tended not to have that now in 5th edition. So why don't we see them in roles such as like wizards and clerics and being politicians and being merchants and things like that? Well, it's because there's an implicit, not explicit, but there's an implicit thing in role-playing games that if you state you get a bonus for something, or if you state you have an advantage in doing something, then chances are you're going to more likely than not gravitate towards that thing. Much like a person who is very strong and tough would gravitate more towards, say, warrior classes, rather than so-called wasting their gifts on, studying in a wizard's tower or something. Now, in reality, in our own culture, we know there are many people who are, say, very artistic, who are working away, drudging away in a cubicle or something. There are people who are uh, physically attractive, who are driving buses and digging ditches, things like that. A lot of times, what our access to our capabilities and what we do with our life are two separate things. Sometimes it's about circumstances, and life throws you a curveball, and hell, it's simply the matter of a person just doesn't want to do that thing, despite the fact that they're 6'8". They don't want to play basketball. They're like, I pretty much like acting, or flower arranging, or I don't know, ballroom dancing. Like, why do I don't need to be a basketball player, right? And so on and so forth. There's plenty of people who are endomorphs that have extremely well developed, like, bodily, um, synergistic muscle structures, and you're like, man, you could be like a personal trainer. And they're like, why would I want to do that? I just exercise to be healthy, and I'm going to go back to work processing paperwork for a medical company or something, right? People do that all the time, but in role playing games, we don't have the luxury of engaging in those things. So orcs tend to be the brutal ones. But the problem with that also, when it comes to implicit roles in life, means that while the other races tend to be value added to society, it means that the mechanical features of that race do not lend themselves to narratively adding to the culture that they belong to. For example, elves have been known to be, they are dexterous, and they are long-lived, and they are, um, well, if not educated, they are knowledgeable, at least in some way, shape, or form, with magic. So, of course, they are assumed to be very intelligent, and people who are knowledgeable about history and magic and arts tend to be the ones who are assumed to be value added to a society. And when you start making cultures that aren't narratively important when it comes to language and the arts and development, and hell, even not putting value on, say, loyalty or family, or hunting and gathering, or um, more ephemeral things, like when it comes to faith and religion and ancestor, the honor to ancestors or something like that. When you start building it just on industrialization, essentially, then the more, I don't know if tribalistic is a good word for it. Um, those cultures tend to fall to the wayside and not be valued, and because they aren't valued, they tend to be known as the other. They are less than. It's very easy to slip into the less than human era and arena, and that's where orcs have kind of fallen into. It's like, well, if you're not bashing somebody in the head, what good are you to a culture? And that's kind of an um, implicit design mechanism when it comes to orcs. Okay, they're in the monster manual, they're known as lawful evil, they kill things, they're known to eat people, and oh, we're going to make them player characters. Well, we're going to relegate them off into the corner because they really don't fit into modern society, as opposed to you know where WotC is trying to change that concept, because in our own modern day, there are people out there who feel that I'm the type of individual that should be relegated to the corner, relegated off to the side, um, not value added to society or something. Um, uh, Omen says, I remember there was a big black character from the Volcaria Chronicles game who wanted to be a medic. He was asked by some of the other characters why not be a heavy weapons or explosives expert, and he just rather prefer helping others than killing. But that's more of a pacifist than anything. Exactly, and that's where we come with the differences and things, right? Like when you're playing a role playing game and someone says, "Oh, you're going to get extra points to bash people about the head," and you're like, well, I want to play a character, but I want to be the medic. I don't want to do that. I want to be more the pacifist. The game implicitly says, well, you can do that, but you're not going to be very effective at it, right? And unfortunately, that pigeonholes that particular race into being one thing. And so when you see the one thing, like we're talking about with Star Trek, where Vulcans and Romulans, or the Xindi that have multiple cultures, they become the exception, not the rule. And so the problem with being an exception is that, are you the exception in terms of like, oh, we didn't know that there were, like, for example, if in world, if we start talking about this in world, maybe the societies in your Dungeons and Dragons game have had such conflict with orcs that no one took the time to realize that, well, maybe there isn't an exception. Maybe they are just as diverse as the rest of us, right? Maybe they do have a deeper understanding of the world and their culture. We just never bothered to find it, which is a real thing that we have in our world today, right? Someone looks at a culture and memifies that culture, as opposed to going, let's have a sit down and talk about what they believe in, or what they desire, or what their daily life is like, right? We and that could be the case, or maybe there's been such animosity. There is a thing where, if you're going to feel the punishment, commit the sin. It could be orcs are like, we used to be pretty complex, but since you started, I don't know, um, organizing, armies for genocide on our people, maybe the only way you're going to listen to us is for us to embrace the stereotype that we are. And maybe those are the only people you ever see, because they're the ones who are least likely to be killed by, genocidal rangers and paladins that are out there destroying the goblinoids, because they're lesser people, right? Bruno's the Sunstar Ranger says, orcs could be a great builders in the world, can build cities up up fast. I could see that, moving heavy equipment and being respected by others for helping them grow society, adding value to society. Exactly, reframing. There's space in there, like Sunstar is saying, there's space in there to reframe the context, right? Just because someone is, say, biologically more likely to be stronger, bigger, tougher, doesn't necessarily mean they're only going to be warriors. Like you said, maybe they're builders. Maybe they are excellent. They probably make excellent explorers. Hey, we want to explore the other side of that mountain range. Who's ready to go? And everybody looks at the orcs like, why don't you guys go? And hey, there's a couple of dwarves that would love to go with you too, right? I mean, maybe they make great. They could essentially be messengers to when you don't have access to magic, but you want to get a message from one place to another. Maybe they make great Pony Express message carriers because they're tougher and stronger and able to survive longer. That could be another way of reframing their value to a society. Hey, Grimchild, hey, it has been a while. You're absolutely right. Hey, love you too there. Man, it has been a while, but always welcome. Yeah, like Omen says, what about the idea of embittered and cruel halflings? Again, the implicit message has been that, well, if you're going to be a player character race, you're pretty much a nice person and everybody else is the evil. We tend not to layer too many, I was going to say despicable, too many behavioral traits or societal traits on people on the player character side rather than on the NPC monster race side, right? Like it's very easy to go, orcs, they ravage villages because that's the prototypical thing, right? Goblinoid armies outside. And listen, I am guilty of saying this for every video, right? Yeah, there's goblinoids armies on the outside and they're ravaging villages, blah blah blah, right? Omen's like a halfling blackguard anti-paladin. Yeah, possible. Yeah, we don't really talk about like, I mean, sure, elves can be a little bit haughty, and we talk about them being arrogant because they've been around so long. Dwarves being just stubborn or something, but we tend not to really be. I think because of reflection of ourselves, we tend not to want to put too much of a microscope on our own cultures. It's far easy to talk about the other. So people that are like into, we love to look at ourselves as the hero, right? Whether individually or in our own neighborhoods or our own countries or our own cultures or religions or whatever, we're the hero. We don't really like to look at the bad stuff, but in a role-playing game, you can do that pretty easily. And maybe the orcs come into the society and the orcs are like the ones who actually put a spotlight on everybody else. Like, oh, damn orcs, now we're going to accept you in the society. And the orcs are folding their arms like, hold on a minute. Like, I'm not out there stealing crap from everybody. I see you, Kender. And the halflings are like, we're not Kender, we're halflings. And the orcs are like, yeah, right. I see you. I see you stealing crap. Yeah, don't act like oh, we just like to share everything. And no, you don't. Oh man. Yeah, Dante's like, yeah, that's my experience with Shadowrun, not being allowed to be a pacifist by the DM. It could be pretty hard to be a pacifist in Shadowrun anyway. I mean, it's possible to do that and to tell stories that way in Shadowrun, which would be pretty cool as the exception, but it would be pretty difficult to do it, I think. And like I said, sometimes game systems, the implicit rule, how many times have we heard, well, the game has 250 thick pages of combat and 3 pages for charisma interaction. What do you think we're supposed to do in the game? It's that implicit idea that players have, and if they're going to have that implicit idea, then as a gaming company, they're going to want to change their opinions of who and what you are. They don't want an association that that orcs have any like racial connotation, because while it might not be a direct line, there's an implicit idea that exists in there. You know what I mean? Yep. Omen says you could do a neighborhood watch campaign where you're just trying to like stop people from committing crimes or something. Stop stealing that. Come back here, right? Cameron says, I I say let orcs be with many types of societies and settlements, but I feel like there is a lot of value in a tribalistic society. I agree too. I think there is, in our own cultures, we have a value of industrialization over tribalism. And in a fantasy world, I can see it. It doesn't have to be that way in a fantasy world, right? There is maybe, people who live in a tribalistic society look at industrialized. When I say industrialized, I'm talking like, to them, Renaissance era would be industrialized, right? People living in big cities on top of each other, never having to hunt and gather. They operate under like written rule of law versus other things. Maybe they use printing presses. That's what I mean by industrialization. And maybe they see the evils in that, right? Maybe they see that people are taken advantage of in a legal sense, having their property taken away. Maybe there are business people who are lying to them, or they're homeless people living on the streets, right? Tribal culture would be like, homeless. You've got homelessness. Like we take care of each other all the time. Like we might be ravaging other villages, but our own people, we feed everyone. Everyone's got a place in our society. Even the lowest member isn't imprisoned or our punishment is exile. You want to live on your own, fine, go away, but we're not going to kill you. We don't murder our people. We let them go off on their own. They don't belong with us, but they at least have a life. There may be lots of things in between the what we would assume like orcs are like bestial and tribal and and then orcs look at us like us, when I say us, but like the goodly races, and going, you're not that good. And besides, that person over there with horns on their head literally has the blood of fiends running through them. And you think I'm untrustworthy? Yep. Oh, man. Oh, man, you're silly. Talking about the Neighborhood Watch campaign. I remember a comedy game based around that notion played a crazy military type, the character that uses binoculars even though he's inches from the target. That's ridiculous. I love it. Oh, man. Red Dice says, wasn't there an old Mystara gazetteer that covered orc society? I've not read it, so I don't know how closely it cleaved to the stereotypes. I know Volo's Guide has a number of different orc archetypes in it, mostly combat related. And I think they delve into more of like the close and brawler, the curse casting spellcaster, and things like that. They have a lot of those elements in it, but not a lot into it's some of the narrative elements, but not a lot into the like, oh, here's how orcs are going to be accepted into society. Like here's what an orc politician seems like, or an orcish, I don't know, merchant vessel or something, orcish cooks and cleaners and nobles, orcish nobles and stuff. Like, I don't know how that would work because it hasn't been done yet. And now, mind you, while people are making a big deal about what WotC's change is, remember that Dungeons and Dragons didn't start out with nearly half the races that are included as player character options anyway. So all of them have migrated over. Drow elves have migrated over. Tieflings didn't exist at one point. They were called Cambions, and they were in the monster manual too, and they were not player character option. They were literally born from the spawn of a human being or a mortal and some kind of fiendish type 4 demon or something like that, right? So over time, things have moved over. People want to play video games. They want to portray these monstrous races. Dragonborn is another idea. So orcs, we've already gone through this and accepted them inside. I think inside the player character concept, the only difference here is that there is no analogy to like dragonborn or tieflings in our human society. Some have tried to make and have those people have been cast aside, that drow elves kind of represent like African American and Black culture, which you're like, no, there is no analogy to that. But in a lot of the writings, like that Age of Exploration writing with Edgar Rice Burroughs and Lovecraft and a number of others that I can't think of off the top of my head right now, they did have the bestial, savage, darker others. And while like I said before, I'm not a proponent of destroying history. I don't think it's a smart idea for WotC to change things in the past. I just think they should change things in the future. And a great way, a great narrative way, like Sunstar mentioned above, is that maybe we just recontextualize how they fit in, right? Maybe maybe we just include into the game that, much like elves and dwarves hating each other, maybe there were wars between the orcs and humanity, meaning all the other player races, for a long, long time, generations and generations. And we've come to a standstill, and now we've come to the point where we put down our weapons and accepted them and shook hands, and now we are together. There have been, we've misunderstood each other for a long time. I would include that. I wouldn't negate that or delete that. I would include that. Like, yeah, we were wrong for stereotyping the orcs, and maybe they were wrong for engaging in violent acts against us, and now we're together. Yep. Oh yeah. Heck yeah. Omen. I'll get to that in just a moment. Dante says the campaign I've loosely been batting around. Each had a race split into two or more factions that had a flip the script, like high elves and divine magic, but other elves are isolationists. Yep. And could do the same with orcs in that setting. Have the predominant orcs be those builders someone mentioned. Now, mind you, here's another problematic issue with stereotypes. And the problematic issue with stereotypes is that there are people who are those stereotypes, right? When you talk about stereotypes, there's a reason the stereotype exists, and that's because somehow, somewhere, people encountered that from those people, that culture, that behavior, that language, their body language, whatever the case may be, and then taken that and then extrapolated out their encounter to encapsulate everyone of that type, right? So the issue becomes, okay, when WotC includes orcs as a player character race, do we still have barbaric, flesh-eating orc goblinoid raiders out there, right? And I say this because what about the other player character races? They've never been, or they have so long not been, the cast as the bad guy, right? Yes, there are stats for humans in the back of books where there's like the NPC section, like here's your general guard or a knight or a warrior or a merchant or whatever in the back of a book. But as far as like the monster manual, you don't normally see a headline, hordes of humans doing evil human things, right? Um, and I think we're mature enough as gamers to include those things, but as a company, you might not. That's why WotC's changing things in this way, because if you say, oh, well, you can play an orc and you're just a regular orc, you can say and do whatever you want. Oh, and there's also hordes of orcs out there that should be killed. It kind of sending two different messages when that message is not sent across the board of having to kill, I don't know, hordes of it's okay to kill hordes of hobgoblins, but why aren't we fighting hordes of, say, the armies of halflings or those bestial torturous gnomes that live over there on the other side of the countryside, right? The tieflings that have been assembling an army right now, and they're sending out assassins to take over the countryside. We don't see that. And again, the implicit idea is that, oh, well, if it's a player character choice, they can't be the major bad guy. It's only what's listed as a monster. And that can be, yeah. Yeah. I'm with you there, Grimchild. Yeah. Human baddies, we have too many examples of that in our own world. So I think if what my feeling is going forward, I could see Wizards of the Coast changing things. I don't feel they should change things in the past. I think disclaimers should be used, right? And I feel like one for all for one. You know, what a great setting idea that would be, where the humans are the bad guys and everybody else gets to play the other races, right? I wouldn't have a problem playing in that kind of game, but they should offer that as an option. But their implicity in humans good, everyone else bad, or sorry, player character race is good, monster race is bad, is how they're sitting, you know. Red, Red Dice Diary says, true stereotypes? Next he'll be saying, they're chubby, bearded, grumpy gamers. Catch a sight of himself in the mirror. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, Again, the idea of true stereotypes sometimes comes about through, if you're going to feel the punishment, commit the sin, right? If in our own society, it's like, those people are always acting like criminals. Well, if you treat them like criminals, some people are like, well, if I'm going to feel the punishment of being treated like a criminal and I'm not, I might as well commit the sin of doing such a thing. So there is this cycle, this cycle in societies where, like, you know, and I think this would be great in game, where, you know, you have your Knights Order and they have their flaming swords and they're surrounded by radiance and light and goodness, okay? And then Harry, oh man, thank you so much there, dude. Harry, thank you very much for sending in the super chat. I really appreciate that. I will have a cup of coffee, as a matter of fact. Yeah. Third to like the youngster. Just press the right button. Yeah, I would really appreciate, you know, if you guys want to support the channel, you know, like, share, subscribe, follow. Like, you guys are interacting live. If you catch the show later, if you've gone through it this long, catch the show later. Just let people know what's going on. Yeah, unscripted and all that. You know, I even purposefully make myself look stupid to implicitly send a message that we can all learn something a little bit every day. Cameron says they could take further steps, maybe have a redemption mechanic for fiends and a corruption mechanic for celestials. Good Dwargar? I heard it's pronounced Dwygar as well. Good Dwygar and the Illithids could have some good ones too. Exactly. Now and I'll get to Omen's comment in a minute. To you there, Omen. See here, this is a weirdism, but like, you're saying, okay, there's good Dwygar, there's good Illithids, and side note, if if you guys have ever noticed that we know that things that are not exposed to sunlight tend to be more pale, but in literature and role-playing games and a lot of intellectual properties, to show someone is evil, they go darker. There are dark elves. There's the Dwygar, dark. Those are the dark dwarves. The Snurfnevlin, they go dark. And again, I'm not telling anybody that they're wrong for doing it. I'm saying that there are people who use that from elements of the past to as a proof that people who are darker are therefore evil or corrupted or criminalized or somehow animalistic, and those individuals are trying to invade our space in the tabletop role playing community and trying to spread that around as if it's a truism. And there are even people who are going, "Oh, I see that. I think that's right." And I'm like, no, that isn't." You know what I mean? And yeah, yet, like Harry says, Drow, like many others, are corrupted by darkness. And the I don't have a problem with. I honestly, I don't have a problem with all of those things. I think the problem is that there isn't any other option other than that, right? Like you don't see. It's like, oh, humans good, but those that are corrupted turn dark, right? So therefore, the implication is that if I play a character who's or humanity has dark people in it, are they implicitly corrupted? No, I think we're I think the majority of us are pretty knowledgeable. Like that makes zero sense. But there are those who are spouting that kind of stuff, and I feel like maybe Watsy is having a reaction to that small but vocal, that tiny but vocal minority of people, which is kind of funny. I like to call them minorities. um, of people who are trying to spout that kind of evil and whatnot. So yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I agree. It isn't Drow aren't dark because they live in Underdark. Yes, yes, that makes no sense. But I think it was think that was the reason. The reason was because they were corrupted and they were turned that way. Same thing with the Dwygar and the Snurfneblin and some other races and things like that. Harry says back in the day, orcs were a creation of some wizard, and I think in the original Keep on the Borderlands in the Caves of Chaos, the goblinoids that were attacking the local Keep on the Borderlands, um, there was like a an evil cult that was assembling them together. So they were basically like either proxy warriors or they were also corrupted, and that's why they did it. You know what, Rickard, I don't know. I could swear that's the case, but you see what I'm saying? It's there. There's a little bit of a question here. Now Omen says, uh, yeah, like Omen says, well, when you stop to think about it, they're probably equally savage and dangerous, like white European people. I know the Russians have a bunch of urban legends and whatnot. Heck, Slender Man is white, or at least appears white. Undead tend to be more towards like pale and white. Undead, pale, evil, right? That's a thing. Um, but a lot of times, darker is related to evil, and some people use that literary connection. Like for example, Star Wars uses cybernetics as loss of humanity as an analogy for that, and it can be a little bit problematic when you're trying to include people of different ethnicities into a role-playing game, and then you're implicitly saying, oh yeah, but by the way, if you play someone dark, there's pretty much a greater chance you're going to play someone that has some relationship to corruption than not, right? And it could be a little bit, it could be yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, and Rickard says, I think Watsy just made underground equal dark skin back in the day, where they would probably be paler in skin because of no sun. And I think it was well before Wizards of the Coast. That they didn't create that. That they adopted it. They inherited it, I guess would be a better way of saying it. Grimchild says Drow are problematic because their obsidian black skin was explained as a curse from God or Corellon, which is eerily reminiscent of some religious peoples claiming that darker skinned people were descended from Cain from the Bible. Yeah, see, that's and so when you're a company, here we go with the marketing and the company and statistics and things like that. When you start adding it all together, um, from my point of view, you you start putting you start getting the puzzle pieces together, and it's no wonder people think that way, right? Like, okay, so you're saying that orcs basically default into, it's better to play them as more bestial and evil. You're the warrior races. You're saying that they're darker and corrupted. You're saying that, like, you start adding the little things together, both in game and out of game, and after a certain amount of time, it's no wonder that your average player who's never thought of this before just makes that logical leap, you know. Right, and exactly like Rickard says. Like, to be fair, dark elves in myth have the same logical problem. Exactly, and mind you, a lot of that mythology was written by people from their point of view. Right? Hey, we're the heroes; everyone else is the bad guy. Right? Eh, um, that's just a normalism. People are like more comfortable with themselves, and if you are writing stories about a great hero that goes out into the wild, and you're Northern European, you're gonna write those from your point of view, right? Not you, but going back hundreds of years is my point. You go back hundreds of years, of course you're going to write stories where you're the protagonist in those things, right? Um, Omen says, indeed, it wouldn't make sense for them to be dark unless it's for the purpose of camouflage. I'd say that drow are dark so they can be better at hunting at lighter races who can't see in the dark. That's true, although I suppose, yeah, I mean, that's trying to think of it more biologically, I suppose. Yep. Yeah. I'd say darker can be related to the evil in the same way charred flesh is dark, like hellfire burns your soul black. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, you didn't have to do that, Harry. So I really appreciate the super chat, but like you said, like, yeah, yeah, also known as history's rewritten by the winners. Yeah, yeah, that's my why I'm against destruction of history. It seems like we're overrun with this idea of like destroying history. Um, I I think context is important. I don't feel like putting things up on a pedestal, pun intended, right? But no, you don't destroy it. You put it in context. Yes, this thing exists. We'll put it in a museum, put it in a centralized location where people can read the context of why at a certain period of time we thought a certain way. There's going to be a period of time in the future where today, right now, those of us that think we're heroes are going to be the bad guys, and just accept it. So, like you said, Harry, the winners rewrite everything. Could you imagine? What a great storyline that would be for like a knight's order that's committed genocide against the orcs, and come to find out they always knew that the orcs were diverse, peaceful people that were forced into doing battle with the knights just to keep the knights order, you know, in power. And then they were like, well, we're going to have to commit genocide. Otherwise, people are going to think we're the bad guys. We're going to rewrite history to make us the heroes, right? That that's a perfect example of how WotC can flip the script on orcs and bring them into the player character race. Like, yeah, remember this whole time we thought about orcs, committing attacking villages and things like that? No, that was just because we were starving them out and forcing them to live in lands where they couldn't live or something. That'd be great. Yeah. Okay. Dante says, well, Dead Man says, were the drow cursed by Coraline or blessed by Loth? Ooh. Someone who's familiar with Forgotten Realms would probably know that, because I think they delve far deeper into that. I don't know, remember which one. Was it Coraline that cast him out or Loth that embraced them? Might be both. Don majority of the time explaining drow to people for me is explaining that they aren't all bad guys, because that's what the art that's what the art plays them out to be. Yeah. And again, it's like, is it because of drow culture, or is it because of the drow themselves, right? You know, you Dritz is an example of a drow that left their culture and became something different. So would that apply to all the other monster races? And then of course you have a problem when a player goes to play the game and they're like, well, who's our bad guy then? If everybody's good, who's the bad guy? You know? And that's where you just have to think deeper. Like, well, maybe the bad guy is based on personality and circumstance and culture. Maybe we can just think deeply rather than going, well, they're the bad guy because they're the bad guy. Um, Rickard says it's a bit complicated that it's a bit complicated because the light elves equal sun and good. Light elves equals sun, which equals goodness, basically, because the night is scary, especially 24/7 nighttime of the winter time. Yeah, see, and as people, we're scared of the dark. There's certain things we're scared of, certain types of predators, shadows and darkness, snakes, the weather, certain types of insects, and we have a biological need to be scared of those things because there is a reason to be scared of those things as well. And our mythology tends to frame those things together, which is why dragons exist, right? Dragons exist in mythology because they represent all of our fears put together. Something that can fly, something lizard-like, something that breathes out fire because we're scared of that, something bigger than us, something smarter than us, something predatory, So yeah. Grimchild's like, yeah, trial history is complicated, but I'm on my phone, probably looking up something. I hear you. Yeah. Dante's like, yeah, riding giant spiders in the art doesn't exactly inspire happy thoughts. No. Yeah. Omen says, he says night elves of World of Warcraft are kind of popular. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of popularity in playing those types as well. Cameron says, Drow have a lot of evil population because Loth is evil and she drives their culture, from my understanding, which, again, that's a great way of like, well, we can still have our bad guys as orcs and hobgoblins and all that because they're being driven to do that kind of thing, right? They're the proxies. They're the evil lich assembles an army because the evil lich has been controlling them, that kind of thing. So anyway, guys, of course, we can go on and on with this. Rest assured, tomorrow is World Building Wednesday. We're kind of world building as we go along. I think I really want to build a world where the orcs have been accepted into the population, and what happens if all of our baggage from previous gaming has existed in the world up until today. So we've kind of already hit on that, but I think we could pull a lot of stories out of it. So World Building Wednesday tomorrow, third pillar of exploration Thursday comes out. That's my love. And of course we have Future Friday, where we're not exactly going to talk about orcs, but we're going to talk about like alien uprisings and things like that. And we're definitely going to have to include the fact that maybe the orcs aren't as innocent as they claim to be because of their past actions. So that's going to deal a lot with it anyway. So guys, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. Thank you very much for watching. And Harry, again, thank you very much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Actually, both of them. Thank you. Bye.